Okay, so the subject I thought it would be good to speak about comes down to a type of, to call it a view might be misleading. It's more like a kind of axiom of thought that is really taken for granted, that can be expressed in a few different ways, but it comes down to like the idea that there's no such thing as certainty in regard to really the nature of things. There's no such thing as sort of absolute knowledge, and it will come, it's not usually something that people will state like explicitly.
It's implied.
But it's implied in their thoughts, their ideas, and sometimes, you'd be having a conversation with somebody about, for example, right and wrong or something, and just when it seems like it's starting to go somewhere, then they say, oh, well, you can never really know, can you?
Yeah. Well, it's almost like the agnosticism in the suttas. If you were to, people have like what they deem to be sort of like a conventional knowledge, but then if you start pushing it towards the further clarity, it's taken as valid. This kind of dismissal of, well, you can't really know, and that's but it's like, well, you obviously seem to think that you know that. You obviously seem to think that you know that you can't really know. But okay, so if your premise is true, how do you know that? How do you know that you can't know? And then you realize it's a contradiction in terms, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's one thing, is like the statement, in order to be true, must be false, because if you apply it to itself.
Yeah.
And about this, there was a few things that I kind of wanted to bring up about it, because it's really something that a lot of people seem to subscribe to, and it's like, you can see that if you kind of take the notion of knowledge in a kind of scientific sense, as in, we need to know things about the world by gathering information and data about them, then you do have to say, well, whatever we can find out has to be, it can always be disproved by something. You never can absolutely know.
Because, why do you think that is?
Because the data that you can gather and the information that you can gather depends on the instrument through which you are.
Yeah, exactly. So it's purely observational based on the senses, which means all you need to do in order to disprove it is observe something different. That's it. That's it. And the even bigger problem, like in itself, as a method of learning about the world, that's fine, but your mind is not an object of your senses, cannot be the object of your senses. Yet if your only criteria for learning and understanding is gathering information through the observation on the basis of your senses, means the entire domain of your mind and mental development is absolutely excluded from any recognition.
Yeah, and it occurred to me that also is, it's not something that's exclusive to science in that way. I mean, the same type of basing one's ideas, one's views on this kind of information that one gathers. I mean, in, let's say, that Sutta, I think it's Brahmajala Sutta, the end where he's like going through all of the views that different people can have, and they have a huge variety of views based on like different types of information that they gather. I mean, you have one who's being able to remember 40 eons of past lives or something, so that's like an unbelievable amount of information that he has. But then the problem is like that he then goes to say, well, that's the information I have, therefore that's how the world is. The world in itself is eternal, and so on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And the other thing I wanted to bring up about it is that it is one way of expressing what the wrong view, it seems to me, like when he says there are no monks and Brahmins who know the world and understand the nature of the world and declare it, like that certainty, direct knowledge is not a possibility. And to me that also seems like that's one aspect of this wrong view that the Buddha describes. But when I think about it, I can see that it also implies the rest of that description of the wrong view. Because if you're saying, when somebody says, like when I'm talking to somebody and they say, well, you can never really know, you never have any certainty, then, it means for them that, well, whatever I might do, whatever I might kind of strive for, I'm never going to ever know for sure whether it's right or wrong. I'm never ever going to know for sure, like, what's the result of it. So, like, ultimately, in a fundamental sense, everything that I do is sort of...
I'll just hope for the best.
I hope for the best.
Do with my best of the abilities. What do you think? Why do you think they do that? What is the practical basis? Because there is always a practical basis for every wrong view.
Yeah.
Practical, I mean, some sort of involvement that you try to, where you're not admitting to yourself.
Yeah.
So in this particular case, what would the practical basis for that view be? Why would somebody prefer to hold the view of, well, you can't really know anything, or not, you can't be 100% sure, so...
Because when you start thinking that there might be the possibility, there is the possibility, there could be the possibility of direct knowledge, certainty, knowledge of right and wrong, then you can't be really indifferent about that.
Exactly.
You have to do something about it, and you can't.
Or feel guilty for not doing it.
Exactly.
Either way, you can't cover up the weight, the weight of it. Yeah, that's exactly it. That's why it's always wrong views and inauthenticity hand in hand, always. You cannot be authentic and hold the wrong views, nor can you remain inauthentic if you're dropping the wrong views. That's impossible.
Yeah, and I also found it interesting because, at some way I used to kind of not pay that much attention to the description of the wrong view that the Buddha was giving, and like I've heard people say that it's just this sort of, some people in that time had these extreme views about the world.
It tends to be sort of like dumbed down and assumed in these almost like caricature examples. Like, the eternalists and the annihilationists, we are past that point. It's like, no, those are the two fundamental existential views for as long as you're not a Sotapanna. So you're going to be either eternalist or annihilationist. There is no third option for you there. All the variety of the views that Brahmajala Sutta elaborates on fall into these two categories. One say yes and one say no. They don't see the middle.
Yeah. And at least, to me the problem as well with kind of thinking that it's these views, like the wrong view and its counterpart as well, like the right view, are to be found in what somebody explicitly believes and professes. I think such and such a thing. I think it's a problem, because then it would mean that you just kind of get, let's say, the mundane, as it's called, right view or something like that, by sort of just adopting a particular set of ideas.
View. Like as far as the right view is a view, but obviously it's a view that goes in between the two kind of polar opposites of wrong views, yes and no, annihilationists, eternalists, mystics or scientifically oriented, doesn't matter. The right view is the view that puts first is first and everything else is second. So it's not directly opposed to the wrong views in a sense of left to the right. It's more like left, right are both wrong, and this is above. The right view is above both. That's why going beyond the wrong views through a right view, and eventually for an arahant who has brought the right view to fulfillment, he has gone even beyond that vertical view of right perspective. He has dropped everything in that sense. I think initially people will take the right view in a wrong sense through some sort of belief or faith, and that's inevitable. But and that in itself is not a problem. The problem is if then they think that's it. That's all they needed to do. Just let me assume the right things on the basis of information I collected, which, yes, it might be factually less wrong than other views you had before, but the measure of the right view, it's not the measure of your belief, faith, confidence, certainty. It's the measure of, it's measured by your inability to suffer. So, and that's something you can't really lie. I mean, you can obviously cover it up, but fundamentally you're always aware of it as a problem. Like the fact that you're not free from suffering and you know it. And if that's the case, means you shouldn't be deluding yourself into thinking, but I still have a right view. Because if you did, you wouldn't be afraid of suffering anymore. You wouldn't be affected by the suffering anymore. Not to like a, maybe to some tiny degree, let's say like that. From the Arahant's point of view, yes, you would still be affected by suffering as a Sotapanna, but from Putujana's point of view, well, you're pretty much on the level of Arahantship as far as Putujana is concerned, because he has no knowledge of any escape from suffering. And that's the fundamental difference.
Can somebody who, without knowing it, has wrong views underlying their actions and what they're doing, can they practice the Dhamma?
You mean the actual Dhamma?
Yeah.
No, that's impossible.
So even if they, let's say, try to be very virtuous, to be...
all that's commendable and to be encouraged, but it's the right view that makes the Dhamma visible. And if you're not seeing what you're supposed to be doing, then you're not doing it. And even if you're going through all the right motions, that's what Yanavira used to say, he's doing it for the wrong reasons. He's doing right things for the wrong reasons. Yeah, it's still better than doing wrong things for the wrong reasons, but fundamentally, the Dhamma only arises with the right view. And again, it's important to just not lie to yourself about it, because if you think you have access to Dhamma, the actual path to liberation, the Buddha was teaching, without being a Sotapanna, that's it. You already basically assume that you have gained the access to the result of your right view, without the right view, which means you're not going to recognize the importance and the severity of having wrong views, and the importance of actually needing to get the right view, because there is no Dhamma below that. And people would ignore the importance and would not make the effort for the same reason we said in the beginning. Oh, well, there's nothing you can't be sure, because that would then make them feel too unpleasantly about it, because it is a serious weight, burden, and especially if you don't know what to do about it, and now you're even more overwhelmed with the confusion. It's like, well, that's at least a good starting point. Now at least you know what work needs to be done.
Now at least you realize the problem with the position you're in.
Yeah. And in order to recognize in order to find a solution for a problem, you first need to stop ignoring it. I mean, and you know that in a mundane, day-to-day life, when everybody's aware that this person has a problem, but that person is refusing to admit it, and nothing you do, nothing you offer, nothing you in a form of help will actually help, because they refuse to acknowledge that there is a problem, blatantly lying about it to themselves. And that's the same on the level of the mind. So unless you recognize that no, this is a factual problem, that the only way out of this problem would be to get the right view, then you take it seriously, and then you actually have a chance of getting the right view.
And
that's what we were saying before, like the prerequisite for the right view is like the right honesty, or self-honesty, or transparency, or authenticity, whatever you want to call it. Without it, no matter how much, 50 years you can practice Dhamma, you're not practicing the Dhamma.
And can you get the right view by doing something other than questioning your views and trying to undo, or like seeing how the wrong view is wrong?
No, because whatever you would be doing in that case would be on the basis of your wrong views. So you're not really uprooting or undoing the problem, you're just building on top of it. Yeah.
Yep. So just another branch on the same topic that is related to what you just said, that I've kind of come up against, is that when people start to practice And now they say, okay, I want to be a Sotapanna, and if I'm not a Sotapanna, then I can't say that I know. But then, so then they're kind of, the problem is that that people can sort of say, well, there is no certainty apart from one who is a Sotapanna. But then they kind of don't actually change their attitude from that basic attitude of saying, oh, well, nothing can be certain. Because they're kind of thinking
so they abstractly allow possibility of being certain as a Sotapanna, but practically they absolutely abolish it. Yeah, that's probably the most common kind of attitude between like lay people and the monks. In a sense, they're all striving for something, but practically, if you were to develop clarity about it, or to make the effort, or to investigate the meaning, and so on, to actually start doing something about the lack of clarity which is preventing you being Sotapanna, that's always dismissed as if like, wow, that's just your views and opinions. It's like, well, everything, that's your view and opinion. So the question is not having any views and opinions in that kind of non-committal sense, because you're committing to that. The question is, undoing all the wrong views by seeing how they're wrong, why they're wrong. Finding contradiction in them, and that's how you will be unable to hold them, and that's how you are getting closer to the right view, recognizing where the problem is and not covering it up anymore.
And kind of a version of that too is saying like, okay, I think X, Y, and Z, but I'm not a Sotapanna, so I might be wrong, or I'm probably wrong in some way. So then I'll ask somebody else who I think is a Sotapanna, and then I'll follow what they say.
Or not even that, I'll ask somebody else who might have an opinion about it, and that somehow, we're going to arrive at the right conclusion. Yeah, I heard it, I don't know how many times. Exactly that. It's like somebody would ask a very clear question, practical question, and then the answer they would get would be quoting what somebody else might say in that instance. I was like, again, in a mundane sense, the only time I would give you an answer in that way, like you ask me something and I say, well, there's this such and such, and he likes to do this in such cases, is because I don't have a clue what I'm talking about. Because if I understood what I'm talking about, I would understand your question, and I would understand the best answer for you. Even if I'm absolutely kind of illiterate in every other way. You understand the craft, you understand the way out, you will know how to convey it. And the clear indication of not knowing the way out, when somebody asks you a question about suffering or Dharma, and you just keep sort of throwing in references or referring to this, not in like kind of, I'll give you a reference to help what I just told you, but more like, oh yes, the big senior Ajahn, he always says this. It's like, yeah, but I didn't ask the big senior Ajahn, I'm asking you. Because, you offered yourself for that purpose. So that should always be a red flag. And I remember that was always the thing as well. Like, I personally kind of, from the start, was, reading the suttas, philosophy, Vira, that was my thing. Never really listened to any Dhamma talks and so on. And first time I heard Dhamma talks, I thought, I felt like there was nothing being said. It was just people talking for an hour, giving these generic ideas. And I thought, maybe that's just the form of the Dhamma talk. You can't really be very specific. But then the more I listened, the more it became apparent that, no, you can be specific. It's just that these people aren't. And the only reason they're not specific is because either they don't want to tell you, which, why wouldn't they do that? Or they don't know what to tell you. So it's just let me fill an hour with these inspirational terms and so on, and kind of resembling the suttas, sometimes more, sometimes less, but overall, if you know what you're talking about, you would have a straight answer. And there's a direct sutta exactly that says that. When the king or whoever it was asked the Buddha, do you prepare the answers beforehand? He says, no. You are the king master chariot. He says, yes, I am. If somebody were to ask you anything about the workings of a chariot, would you have to prepare an answer? He says, no, if they wake me in the middle of the night, I'll give them an answer immediately because I fully understood the working of it. Same with the one who is basically practiced the way rightly, who is enlightened or who is on the way to be enlightened. He will be able to convey their way at any given time. So it was always like and then obviously, once I started talking, I realized, you can be very specific. And as a matter of fact, the suttas were talks. The sutta, the Buddha didn't say and wrote down the suttas. He didn't sit down and wrote down the suttas, premeditating what he's going to say. It was basically recorded conversations. So there is no problem with the medium of of like a direct discourse. The problem is that there is no substance to it generally, and that's like, again, that's found in suttas, probably often overread. It's like when a man comes seeking heartwood and asks a question how to find the heartwood, and then he was given the answer about sapwood, and the man not knowing any better, he takes the sapwood to be the heartwood, and he'll stop looking for the heartwood.
Yeah. And so another problem I think also is like when somebody needs to rely on somebody else's views or what somebody else says because they themselves don't know.
Yeah.
Then what can happen is that they themselves stop taking responsibility for having like, okay, so and so said this, I have faith in him, so that must be right.
That's it.
And now it's not me thinking this anymore.
Yeah.
It's not what I think anymore. And now,
even if that person is factual Buddha himself, if you took the practice on that level, means there is no practice for you for as long as that doesn't change, that attitude.
And so then, like, you know, it's terrible. Like anything that contradicts what you have decided to have faith in, you can say, oh, no, that can't be right, while at the same time kind of forgetting that actually you don't know for yourself which one is.
Well, that's like one of the like the basic logical fallacies, and all of them have the same thread. I don't know if I mentioned it at all, but it's all that cover up, avoiding to take responsibilities. So it's either you assume the authority, either some senior monk or your teacher or the religion or the texts or the scholarly study of the dictionary. See, now that's it. That's factual, how it's written, all done for the purpose of but what does that mean for you? Just like the difference that the Buddha often talks about in the sutta, the phrasing and the meaning. The meaning you won't find in the phrasing like self-evident. You need to actually undo your wrong views for these subtler meanings to become, because everybody reads the suttas, but almost nobody gets the right view on account of reading the suttas. Why is that? Either the suttas are wrong, or the instruments that people are reading the suttas with, the views, the what they perceive, the concepts, everything else implied in it is completely covered, like layers and layers and layers of the wrong views that the Buddha lists in Brahmajala Sutta. And that's why there is no meaning becoming apparent.
Does it kind of maybe come down to the difference between, okay, is my aim to genuinely go beyond doubt, or is it to like become a sotapanna according to my idea of what somebody said a sotapanna is?
That's going to be the first thing. Like, I want to become a sotapanna. As the sutta say, such and such became sotapanna, well, if he can do it, I can do it, type of thing. So, it's taken wrongly, but it does sort of aim, in the broader sense, in the right direction. But then, yes, you could spend next, as I said, 5 decades of just protecting that view and not really recognizing or stepping further into understanding what actually means to be a sotapanna. I want to become sotapanna and I'm doing all these things, but why do you do what you're doing? Why are you doing these practices? Why are you even keeping the virtue? Why, like, do you understand, or you're just doing all of that because you were told to? And that would be the difference then. If somebody's actually getting closer to become a sotapanna, is one who starts questioning all these things and trying to understand them, then inevitably you're going to arrive at the doubt and understanding what the actual problem of the doubt is. It's not what you're doubting. It's the presence of the discomfort of the doubt. And again, that's something you can theorize about it, but it will never be right until you actually start enduring it.
And because people can kind of think, well, okay, becoming a sotapanna will free me from doubt, rather than it being...
Freeing myself from doubt will make me a sotapanna. Yep, that's exactly it. Yeah. The horse or the cart. People put the cart in front of the horse and think, let me just do these practices. They will result in my magical awakening of sotapatti, and then these fetters will fall off. self-view, doubt, and virtue and duty, and so on. But it's the other way around. It's you fully understanding these fetters is how you become a sotapanna. So you understanding the virtue and duty and freeing yourself from that assumption of it, freeing yourself from assuming the external sense of self outside of your experience, and freeing yourself from the pressure of the doubt. And then, when these three fetters don't move you, it's safe to say you're sotapanna, not the other way around.
It's interesting how even like the ideas that people have about the Dhamma can be used to sort of justify holding the wrong views. I'm thinking of an example where somebody might say, okay, no, this is how it is, this is how it can be discerned directly in your experience. And then the response was, well, no, because, that's not a ground for being sure about it, because, a Puthujjana sees self in his experience. So, like, the idea that there is, because there's not supposed to be a self.
Right.
So,
well, it's on that kind of arm's length level, like whether people, yes, it's possible, but it's never taken on that personal level, because again, it's gonna fetters are not seen because people avoid seeing them or admitting them because they're unpleasant. Like the reason why everybody so easily assumes external duty and virtue and practice and method and technique is because it's easier than to leave it non-specific and then feel the burden of confusion and everything. Am I doing right? Am I doing wrong? What do I do? How do I do it? Or fundamentally, if you stay in that state, you would recognize, my only concern here with this entire state is that it's unpleasant and I refuse to accept that discomfort of it. That's why I'm worried about what to do. Not because I really need to know what to do. And more often than not, you actually know what you need to do. But when the pain pressures you, you doubt everything because your primary concern is aversion towards pain must be avoided, always. The pain must be, dealt with instantly. And that's why you get then liable to doubt and everything else, because you gave it power.
Yeah, not even seeing that, what you're doing is trying to avoid the pain of it because your mind is focused on, I have to solve this question and this problem. Related to that, actually, like another thing I noticed about this kind of thing that people end up coming down to as, I can't be sure about that, or that you can't really be certain about this thing, is that it can be kind of used to justify holding, let's say you have an idea about right and wrong, for example, like usually, and this, not to go into kind of specific ideas of right and wrong, but it usually would kind of be like on the level of a specific template of how the world should look and how people should behave and should act, and it should be like this, and etc. That this is right, and then anything that's, but then you kind of you come to the point of realizing, well, that's nothing I do will ever be able to create that template how I want it to be. It can't be quite consistent.
It's always out of reach in that sense.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And instead of then realizing, well, my idea of what is right and wrong might be flawed or might be wrong. It's like, well, you can't ever be perfect. You can't ever.
Just try your best, and that's it. But even that then becomes just a coping mechanism. Because if you realize you are trying your best and still nothing changes in a way, things don't matter, then you either just dismiss that, or you recognize, well, maybe, my best efforts are completely misdirected. And that's the painful thing where the honesty comes in. If you start admitting it, you realize, because if 10th of these efforts that I have been making factually were actually directed to the things that matter, such as freedom from suffering, greed, aversion, delusion, if you made effort to clarify that and not act out of it and everything else we talk about, you I would have had the results I'm hoping for. But it's people are easily misled because they already are misleading themselves through not being honest enough. Why you're doing what you're doing, and why you're holding views that you're holding.
And it's much easier instead of that is so unpleasant to kind of accept the possibility that everything that I've been doing and all the efforts I've been making might have been in the wrong direction, or perhaps.
Yeah.
But it's much easier then to kind of fall back on this. Oh well, it can never be quite perfect, and nothing I do. Yeah. Again, like there are no fruits and results ultimately of good and bad actions.
Yeah, exactly. So you fail to even grasp the mundane right view, and that's exactly. I mean, I've seen senior monks saying that after I don't know, I said decades in a row, giving Dharma talks and saying like no, and I don't mean they were speaking poetically. They spent an hour explaining what they meant, and what they were saying was, oh, it's nothing to be attained. Like all these things about getting no, it's not about attaining anything. Don't worry about becoming a Sotapanna. Don't worry about it. Just be here now, and then the whole talk revolves around that concept of don't do anything, just accept yourself the way you are. I was like, but you are a Patujana. If you accept yourself as somebody who is drowning, means you will never gonna save yourself. You will drown. Oh yeah, I accept the fact that I'm drowning. Okay, fine. Goodbye then. Or, no, I don't accept the fact that I'm drowning. I'm going to at least try and get out of this quicksand or whatever I'm in. Well, now you at least have a chance because you're trying. But I'm sure that none of those senior teachers started with that view. They probably had more or less genuine view in the beginning, but having been going wrongly about it, you end up covering it up more and more and more. And obviously, the more you go in that direction, the further away you drift from even basic honesty on that existential level, and then it becomes easier to then even just blatantly cover up or dismiss or like not even consider whether that might contradict the suttas and so on, because look, I've been 50 years doing this and I'm fine, I'm a good person. It's not about being a good person, it's about ceasing to be a person. It's about freeing yourself from entire samsara. If you want to be a good person, fine, but that's not what the Dhamma teaches. That's like somebody who can't practice the Dhamma, okay, at least be a good person. But if you can practice the Dhamma, that is the goal. So again, people come and look up to those, teachers or teachings to find the heartwood, to find the source of the meaning, the core of the teaching, and all they get is kind of irrelevant bark and sapwood and stuff that's useless, or that's just relatively useful for mundane matters. So if there was nothing to be attained, would have the Buddha talked about it so often? If it's all about just being here and now and accepting, not judging and whatever else, the Buddha would have surely mentioned that. No. He does not tolerate, he doesn't welcome, he doesn't act out, he critically and endures it, endures the elements, endures the words of others, purifies his mind from the states, day and night, takes responsibility, is virtuous, sense-restrained, doesn't look for loopholes. So there's plenty to do. Yet your conclusion from all of that is, right, okay, be here now and just relax and, calm down and that's it. It's all fine, there's no problem. You are the one creating problems. Yeah, because problems are there. It can seem that you are creating them by looking at them. So what the child does when it's scared or doesn't want to deal with it, it covers its eyes, thinking, okay, I don't see it, it's not there anymore. But if it were not there, why would you have to cover your eyes in the beginning?